idea of Google Summer of Code, which Joomla has been involved in since the very beginning, I believe.
Yes.
Yep. Is to help students learn more about open source, get more involved in open source, and do something more useful with their summers than just flipping burgers. Flipping bits, not burgers. Now, Google are keen on this partly because they like to be nice to all of the open source communities out there that make the world a better place. So if Google gives some money to an organization and it funds a student to do something useful, that's great for the whole world. Google are also keen because Google like hiring open source developers. So this way, all the mentor organizations get to train up future people for Google to go and poach and work for them later. So, you know, that's good for them. And then it's good for the organizations to get involved because a lot of the people who take part in Google Summer of Code for the first time as a student stick around. We've had hands going up in the room of all of those of you who have taken part in Google Summer of Code, who have got hooked, who've stayed around. And hopefully we've also got a few people who were originally students who then become mentors. I know that in many organizations there are now board members of open source foundations who first got hooked through being a GSoC student, and then a regular member of the community, then a GSoC mentor, and then eventually a board member. So there's this amazing route through for new people to draw them in, to get them involved. So what we're hoping to do today is talk to you a little bit about the projects that have taken place this year in GSoC, in Joomla, and also to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look. So we're going to get some of the students to talk to you about the projects they've done. And we've also got their mentors here who can talk to you a little bit about the advantage that the project got and also some of the hilarious, slightly less hilarious things that went along with trying to help these wonderful new people in the community get involved and get that useful code actually pushed into production coming into the next version. We have some presentations, we have some talks, we have made the lovely AV guys lose their hair through the stress of this whole thing. So do please bear with us when we're trying to switch presenters. So I believe we have parallel testing up first. So who is the person for parallel testing? Stick your hand up and wave. Okay, is your mentor with you?
No.
No, okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you had to explain your project to the room in 60 seconds. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can do it.
Why are we doing this?
In 10 seconds.
Okay, go.
So my project does super fast parallel acceptance testing for Joomla extension, starting with web links.
Does that make sense to everyone? You want to know some more? Come on, nod. He's going to talk anyway, but it's much better if you actually look enthusiastic. So come on, who wants to know more? The coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Okay, off you go.
Yeah. So as I said, I did the parallel testing project for Joomla this year. And its main purpose is to parallel acceptance testing done with Codeception for Joomla extension. And as a guinea pig for that, we started with web links. Right? So what's the problem, actually? For a usual company which builds an in-house product, right, they have control about their server. So they have a predefined configuration, and their software works on that one, so they have to test to work really well on that server. But for an open source project, such as Joomla and Joomla extensions, right, we don't have control about the environment in which the software runs. So it has to run on PHP 5.4, 5.6, 7, 7.1, right? On Apache server, Nginx servers. So when we develop that, we actually need to test it for each configuration. So that's where this project comes in. Also, we need to test on different browsers and so on. So my project focused on the server side. So we need to test it on whatever configuration we need, right? How are we going to do that? It's a matter of automatization, right? So we need to be able to deploy the environment, with variable configurations, and also add the dependencies needed in order for Joomla to run, such as databases or caches for the project to run, right? What's the most important thing for testing, right? It's early feedback. So when someone makes a PR request, it is really good if they can get really, really early feedbacks if their code is running properly, right? So we propose a solution. We have the following flow. So when a testing request comes in, we load the configuration, we deploy the containers with all the Joomla instances, the database, and everything. We do the parallel testing, and then we output the results of the testing in a way that people can understand it. In terms of technologies, of course, we use for deployment Docker and Docker Compose in order to automate the whole environment deployment. Robo for parallelizing the tasks and run them as processes. Memcached as a semi-persistent database in order to keep the information on tests in memory and in order for it to be accessible from different processes at the same time. And of course, conception for acceptance testing. So what about implementation? The project is split up in 3 main components: the virtualization, the selection list, and the main coordinator, right? So what does virtualization do? Its main purpose is to load the configuration and deploy all the containers needed for the environment, such as the Joomla servers, the Selenium containers where tests run, and the dependencies, such as the database for the containers and the cache, the memcached. Now there's another problem with acceptance testing and with code session tests. So it's not that simple. You don't have isolated cases. So for example, at the first step, you need to install Joomla, let's say. Well, that's done automatically, but just bear with me. So you need to install Joomla. If that fails, you cannot run any other test. So then you need to invalidate them, right? So actually, the structure of the test is like a directed iCycle graph, right? So if something fails in the middle, then the rest will not run, right? So here the selection list comes in. For each Joomla server that we need to test, we build a selection list, which main responsibility is to store the tests and also their dependencies, and always be ready to give up the next available test for running when asked for. Yeah. So also, it manages the test statuses. So when a task is completed, it will know that it is failed or executed, right? And if it's failed, then it will just invalidate all the tasks that are dependent on that task. And obviously, all is stored in memcached, because we do tests in parallel. So we start one process for one test, one process for another test, and then we need, at the end, the result to be stored in the same place. And of course, in order to not mixing up, a simple locking algorithm needed to be implemented. So if some process access a selection list, then another process has to wait until the other process finished, right? Now, for performance, it is very important to have good scheduling. So we have a lot of Selenium containers with Firefox that are running tests on some servers, right? But what if one server configuration, so Joomla, let's say 3.7 with PHP 7.0, then only for that server, the tests run only for that server, right? And what if one test then takes a really long time? You basically have to wait until that finishes, and a lot of server and clients are sitting there idle, waiting. So we need to make sure that each configuration has his own spot in the running environment. So then you ensure that at every time the capacity is used in full. And of course, in order to make things go smoothly, a simple round-robin algorithm has been made in order to get to the next server, next server, next server, but also every server has a dedicated spot that he cannot lose. So this...
Just get a conclusion, so
yeah, sure.
Got a few more people to go.
So as the coordinating part, the main coordinator, it starts the environment, it runs the tests, and then it saves the output as logs and screenshots for the failed task. So these can be easily integrated and put it in the PR request for everybody to see where's the problem. Right? Next, we want to integrate it in the CI tool and expand, of course, to other extensions. This couldn't have been possible without some great mentors. So Tito, who unfortunately is not here, Niels. A round of applause for Niels. And Astrid. Thank you very much.
So what would you say was the best thing about taking part in GSoC this summer?
Well, the best thing was the community. We have an extraordinary community. And then, of course, all the opportunities I had to learn new things and help Joomla in the process. Yeah.
Right. Who's up next? Get a wave of a hand.
Me? Okay.
This one?
No.
The other one?
I don't have presentation.
Okay, that's you then. Okay, so 60 seconds. What's your project?
So my project for this Google Summer of Code was to improve the extensions manager for Joomla 4 and provide users a better experience while they are managing their extensions.
Okay, have we got your mentor here?
What? Yes, I have two, Anibal and Nicola.
So, Annabelle, why does this matter to the community?
I think that the main purpose of the program is to help to the students to know the open source technologies, and I think that the program really succeeds in that direction, and they have the real world learning experience working with open source technologies and Joomla.
What was your biggest challenge this summer?
My biggest challenge this summer was because I had to code for Joomla 4 and there's no documentation yet. So I was struggling a lot in the beginning trying to find how can I do this without documentation. And so I got angry a lot of times. I kicked my desk sometimes also, but in the end I could finally understand and start reading the lines and the code instead of reading documentation. Yeah, I think that was the best challenge.
But now you
The
can
better
write the
challenge.
documentation, right?
What?
But now you can write the documentation.
Yes, sure. Yes.
Or maybe that's next year's GSoC.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Shall we move on?
What?
Or do you want to talk a bit more about your project?
To speak more about my project?
Yeah, do you want to?
Okay, so the project were, in summary, there were 5 features. So I improved a lot of parts in the extensions manager. One of them, the first one, so I started with the more easiest ones and went to the hardest ones because I need to get some experience to reach the last one feature. So the first 2 features, they were more easy, were to implement a modal to show the change log of when you are updating an extension, so you know what is about to change when you click in the update button. I think it's important. The second one was to edit the URL update location. So, for example, you can set another channel for updating your extension. The third and the fourth were the features that I liked most. The third was fix a database for extensions, because currently now you can only fix the core database in Joomla. And so if you have a broken database in some extension, you don't have help in the fix database section. So I remodeled the whole view, and you can now fix the core database and the extensions. The fourth was, I think it was also very important, it was download key manager, because you can, if you have a lot of paid extensions, you have a lot of download keys, and sometimes you need to go and search, oh, I have on this extension, and you have to go there. And with this feature, you can have all your download keys in a single view and edit them there. The last one, it was the hardest one. It was to provide a signature when you are updating your extensions. So there are, for example, no data corruption and prevent some attack vectors. Okay? This was my Google Summer of Code.
Okay. Thank you to our students. Okay, we're going to need to move on to the next one, but as we go along, remember the faces of these smiling students, and in the break afterwards, if you want to know more about their extensions, come find them, come talk to them. I know that they've been really passionate about the work they've done, and they'd love for you to talk to them more, inspire them more, and also help them. So just remember the faces, go talk to them afterwards. Who's up next?
Me?
Okay. So, 60 seconds, what was your project?
Okay. So my project essentially is a pull request testing platform. So when you want to do a fix for a bug, you do a pull request to the repository, and then people who want to test the repository have to pull the code and set it up in their computer. So what I did was basically a platform where you request the tests for the pull requests, and it generates an instance, a Joomla instance, and an URL where you can visit it and test the pull request in an easier way, so that more people can test it in a more easier way. So that basically.
Okay, is your mentor here?
Yeah, Niels there.
Hiding down there?
Tito's not here, and Ashan there. So those are my mentors.
Okay, so thank you, mentors. So for you, what was the most exciting thing of the summer on Joomla?
Well, several things actually. So, but I got the chance to meet a lot of new people, extraordinary people, different experiences. I got to learn a lot. You can really improve yourself as a professional and as a person, and that's basically the most rewarding thing about this. And all the community you meet and the amazing efforts people do to improve the community and and Joomla itself.
If you could give one piece of advice today to yourself when you first started on GSoC, what would that be?
To start GSoC earlier. And to be more patient, and because in the beginning it's a lot stressing, and it inspires a bit of fear to go into a project you know almost nothing about, and meeting new people and this whole new experience, and that's really a great experience. But then everything you gain in the end, it completely makes it worth it.
Great, thank you. Thanks. So before we move on to our next student, I believe we've got the GSoC Administrator hiding on the stage. So what do you feel is the key thing that a potential Joomla GSoC student should have when they're putting their application together? What's going to inspire you to accept them?
Is the question for me or for
The GSoC Administrator.
So we have 3 admins. at
Okay,
the moment,
one of you,
please.
pick one.
I think Yves is the right person to answer about it.
What was the question again?
What should potential students have or show to inspire you to accept them?
They should focus on their energies. They should be ready to learn a lot, to experience new things, because it's totally different to their experience on the university. So they should be ready for that. But as long as they are brave, any student can make it. And we had really great students that year. And yeah, it's always about being excited for what you are doing. That's the most important thing.
Have we got another student ready to tell us about the great things they did all summer?
Yeah, I have a presentation, so...
Let's wake it up. Oh dear. We need a password. Sorry about this. High security.
Go ahead and start talking about it.
Yep.
Introduce yourself. Where you're from.
Okay. Oh, okay. I have something.
So, 60 seconds. What's your project?
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to overview my project. My project was publishing workflow. I have created a component that takes patterns from categories, component, and it is easy to use in other components and for external too. So that's what I have done on the GSoC. And who am I? I'm young. I'm 20 years old and I'm from Poland. I'm the student of GSoC this year. So okay, and here's my mentors.
If you're one of the people on the screen, can you wave your hand so we can clap to you?
Yeah,
I know a few of you are here. Come on, admit
Nan's
it.
Here, so let's clap for him.
Thank you to the mentors.
Okay, and without them, I couldn't do that what I have. So they resolve all my issues and answered to all my questions. So that's I'm really thankful for that. So let's start. What's the workflow? Workflow is a way that some item have to pass through to be in the end of this some stage. For example, one item should pass through to publish its state, and there have to be several steps that have to pass through. And how it works now in the Joomla. Now we have four states, only unpublished, publish, archived, and trashed. So that states could be modified by everyone nowadays. So we improve it in our component and create a complex way to change the way that item is publishing to the end user. So in our component you could do something like this, and if you want to know more about how we do that, how it works, and stuff like that, go to our session at 4 p.m. It's called Joomla 4.0 New Publishing Workflow. It's done, so okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So beyond getting your own conference speaking slot, which we're all going to go to later. What would you say was the best thing that came out of the summer for you?
Sorry?
The best thing for you this summer?
Okay, I think the best thing was that when I came to my mentors, I give them a question, and they answered very quickly and resolved all my issues that I had, and for me that was very very strong to resolve. So I couldn't do that, and they do it in a few seconds. So for me, that's impressive.
Great, thank you. Thanks to our student. So I believe we have one more to go. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh. That one, okay. So, would you like to give us, while I sort the slides out, 60 seconds, your project?
Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Shivam Rajput. I work for the JSoC project. This is basically divided into two things, one for the Joomlers and one for the volunteers. So, I would be starting with the guided tool for the Joomla CMS. So what was that? If we look through the Joomla, for the new Joomlers, okay, I can hold it. For the new Joomlers, okay. For the new Joomlers, it would be quite difficult to understand how it is going to use the new components, any modules. So this was the problem statement. So what we did, we tried to make the guided tool for the Joomla for every component. We have introduced the new button, that is take the tour button for any component module. It depends what new Joomla want to see in that view. We can change the files over JSON. So I have used JSoC library, Hoppe library over here, and we can start a video.
How long?
It is around 20-30 seconds.
20 seconds, yep, I think we can do that. Oh, come on. There we are. There we are.
So it is Joomla.
Use your microphone.
Sorry. Okay, the Joomla CMS. So it's not study buffering only. Okay. So what the user will do, he or she will click the any component. There will be a button present over there on the top right short corner. That is take the tour button. As soon as he clicks the button, the tour will be started. Okay, switch to the slides. I have proper slides.
Okay, sorry, we're having issues with YouTube here.
Not a problem.
Web containers are dodgy.
Come on. No.
That component. Okay. Did it get it in or is it already?
So here's the button. Tour vanilla. All right. Something I don't know what happens to it. Okay. So as soon as you click the button, the first there will start a content title. We can look through it. He clicks the next. It goes to publish, then unpublished content. It depends on how much file there are in JSON, how much text in the JSON. It directly connects to the CDN and directly it can be a multilingual thing also. And if there is no file of JSON over the server, it will show that we don't have the file. You can create it as a volunteer. You can suggest them, and they can create the file over the JSON test over the server. Okay, now to the second part that is for the volunteers. As Sandra told me, it was quite difficult to take the screenshots again and again. And so we used a Joomla browser library, Joomla browser project that was done by Puneet Calça. And I used it, and I was quite successful to use it. So here, what I do in that, we start a script, and it's load every component what URL we are fixed in that browser, in that robo file. We pull that file, and we just start the script. It takes the screenshots. Can we video?
I don't think YouTube likes us today.
Not a problem. So it depends how many URLs are there in that video, in that robo file. So if it are 100, 200, it depends. And the naming will be done automatically. In 5 minutes, we can take around 230 images. Before it was around in 3 to 4 minutes. Yes, Sandra? How much time you take to take one screenshot? How much time you take to take one screenshot?
It was quite time because we have something like 200 help screens and have to do all the screenshots. So it
Okay,
takes
so if
months and months to do.
2-3 minutes for one screenshot. Now we can take in 5 minutes. 5 minutes we can take 230 screenshots in 5 minutes.
Instead of months.
Yeah, instead of So any questions so far?
Okay, thank you.
These are my mentors, Tom, Joy, Andra, and Peter Martin. Thanks to them.
Thank you. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So would you like to?
I'd like to say something. And I was asked to do a bit of an introduction in detail to the team that's sitting here. But in our eagerness to get these beautiful stories out of the participants, we kind of jumped that gun. We have 5 beautiful stories here of 5 beautiful students that made great stuff. But there was a group of a total of 10. And of those 10, 2 didn't make the cut. So to me, that shows that we are taking this very seriously. So if you participate, it's not something that just, okay, you enter and you pass. 3 of the students couldn't make it here, and they deserve all the credits themselves. And before I go to the admins, I'd like to say that these admins, there's 3 of them on stage who will be asked to stand up, and I'll probably get killed for that afterwards. But they put in a ginormous amount of time. And to elaborate on that, starting next week, they will already start on next year's Google Summer of Code. And there will, if it's something like last year, there will be dozens of applications that will all be discussed. They will all be judged and merited, and the ones that made it through were vetted and were deemed to be potentially an addition to core. So there's a lot of things going on there and a lot of effort, and in that sense I would like to thank Sandra, so please stand up and kill me afterwards. Puneet. And my friend Yves. These are the 3 that put in timeless hours in making this happen, so they deserve as much credit as our students. Thank you.
And Hannibal. You missed Hannibal.
Oh, is he Hannibal? Okay.
He's a mentor, not an admin, but yes, we missed a lot of mentors.
No, yeah.
And
Would you mind telling us a little bit about how Google supports this whole process and what that means to our community?
So Google has been running Google Summer of Code program since year 2005. And the idea behind Google Summer of Code is to support open source organizations and get more and more college students involved into open source communities. So Google pays students to work for open source organizations, and they also pay each org that participates in GSoC program. So for every slot or every project that we get, every student we get, Google pays us for each project some amount, and they also pay the student for their work. So they have a budget every year, and this year we had 201 organizations, and each year we keep growing in terms of the number of students and the number of organizations that are participating in GSoC. And it has been very beneficial for our organization because we have had some more major important projects with GSoC almost every year. A lot of work gets into core because of GSoC. So we have been, I think, we have had a lot of benefit from GSoC, and that's the reason why we keep participating in the program every year. And I think the reason we have been successfully able to do GSoC every year is because of the team and the mentors that we have every year. So I think I would like to thank all the mentors, those who helped us this year, and those who help us consistently from the past few years that we have had GSoC. So thank you everyone on that.
So we've heard already that you're starting to think about next year. For those in the room who've been inspired and want to mentor or propose a project next year, what do we need them to do now and when are the deadlines?
At the moment, Joomla doesn't know that we are going to be one of the participating organizations for 2018. But we have to start preparing the application because we have deadlines for applying to GSoC. That's the reason why the admins are going to start working from next week. But if you want to be a mentor next year, I think January, February is the time when we look for the people who want to help us on GSoC. So if you want to be a mentor next year, you should let us know about it by December or January next year. And for students, I think the deadline or the week that they are supposed to start applying for the organization is the first week of March next year. So if you are a student and if you are willing to participate in GSoC with Joomla, you should start applying in the month of March next year.
Okay, I know there's going to be some people watching this on the video who are unable to just walk up and ask you guys and girls for advice on this. So for anyone who is watching the video and wants to get involved and is not here, where do we send them? Where do they go to find out more to get help?
You can look at the volunteer page for our team, and we have all the content details. We have an email, Joomla GSoC, GSoC@opensourcematters.org or GSoC@joomla.org. And you can just drop us an email and we will let them know about it.
There's also soon we are going also to start mailing list again. We start with that early. We have the one of last year still online. We didn't close it. So that's a good way to contact us too. Yeah.
Okay, we have almost run out of time. So if I can give you all one parting thought for the room and for the video on GSoC.
I would like to say that for me, this was my first mentorship. I was recruited by Puneet to coordinate one of the teams, and I think I can say that it is a very rewarding experience. It is amazing the effort that the students put into the program to know the open source technologies and Joomla. If we can help us as a mentor, it's a great opportunity to help the project and open source to progress in the technology. Yeah.
Someone else? Parting thought? Okay.
Nick, would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, and can you give us a little bit of a perspective of this GSoC team compared to others you have seen?
Okay, so my name's Nick Birch. I volunteer with the Apache Software Foundation. The Apache Software Foundation has also been involved in GSoC from the very beginning. The big difference, I think, versus Apache is that here there's a relatively tight-knit group who are all driving it forward. At Apache, it's almost a federated structure. So there's lots of different individual projects doing their own thing, and you'll find that a couple of people on the web server know each other, but they won't necessarily know the people working on Hadoop. Whereas here, I get the sense that everyone is all in together as one team, and so there seems to be a lot more support available for the mentors and also for the students because you're all together, you're all one group. And I think that's a really powerful thing because, as we heard, there's only been a few people dropping out. You've got a very good rate of student pass and also a good rate of students still in the room a few years later compared to some other organizations. And I think that togetherness that you have is going to be very important for keeping those people involved and keeping them going forward, which is half the point. We want to train up new developers, but we also want to keep those people with us because it's a shame to spend the time training someone to lose them. If you can keep them together, then they move on, they become the next drivers, the next team leads, maybe even the next board members. And I think that's a really great thing for Joomla to have, is that power, that passion, and the togetherness. Thanks. We did start late, but I fear that we have overrun our slot. I'm just looking. Can we keep going? understanding. Let's not pick anything personal, but a sort of understanding or an expectation.
Yes, I think that one of the biggest challenges is that the students arrive to the project just from the faculty, and sometimes they are not ready for the real work experience in the project. So sometimes part of the mentorship is to train them to this kind of new experiences more associated with the professional life. Even being in this moment in a session, having to talk about their work, to express in a proper way and to communicate some ideas is very challenging for them, and I think that's an excellent experience.
Okay, and let's turn that around for the students. Was there something that your mentor asked you to do that was a big surprise from a technical or an organizational background? Anything, source control, ways of working, pull requests, community, anything that was a surprise?
Can I? Come on. So, in the beginning, we were asked to test pull requests and to do some patches, and like that. That was we did know we had to do something, but we weren't prepared to start fixing bugs without knowing at all the code. We had to first analyze it, see the documentation, and that was a bit challenging at first. And I think each of us in each of the projects, it was a bit challenging doing something we are not used to. Like when you're in college, you're not used to regular schedules. So you have to start building your schedule and starting to organize yourself and your schedules, and that is another challenge which I think all of us had. So yeah.
Yes, and they are coding and writing documentation and all of these tasks associated with the development in their summer when they should be on holidays.
Is this talking? I was about to talk that also after Ricardo, that I also was surprised because in the beginning I read Google Summer of Code and I was just thinking that, okay, so I make lines of code, pull requests, and it's okay. But so not that I know that I had to write something else besides that, but there's a lot of more stuff after just writing the code. And I think it's way more important what we do after we make the code. Document, write, for example, testing instructions. For example, in our project, we have to make technical notes on all the features, why we need them, an overview, and all the changes we are making to, for example, for the core and stuff like that. And I think that was surprising because I was not expecting to be so far more than just coding this summer. And thank you again to my mentors for teaching me that. Okay.
Yeah. So another challenge that can crop up with GSoC is that as a student, you're used to being in a university with your support group around you. And now all of a sudden, your support group, your mentors, they're in different countries, often in different time zones. So as students, how did you find that and how did you work with that?
Yeah, that is definitely another challenge. It's having people like 6 or 7 or 8 hours away and trying to manage a schedule that fits everyone so that we can because we had to have regular weekly meetings to discuss what was done, what we needed to do, and what we are doing wrong, what we need to help with. And I think, at least in my case, most of the time I didn't have any idea what I was doing. but the mentors helped me a lot with that, and I thank them for that. It was really challenging to have to manage, like when you do a project from the ground up, you have no idea where to go and how to proceed, and then you have to take things step by step. And like in the first month, I didn't have any idea where we were supposed to be headed in 2 months' time. So, but gladly we were able to step by step, trying to figure it out. We get there. We eventually get there. So, yeah.
For the mentors, how did you find drawing these exciting students into the Community Go? Getting them involved in the ways of working, getting them involved with the other contributors. How did that go? One of the mentors, come on.
As we only have one mentor in the front, anyone has to answer, or Duke, you can get a microphone to George or Niels. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, but we don't have an hour.
Don't give it to Niels. Come on. Sandra is also on the panel. She was a mentor. What was the question?
How did you find drawing them into the existing Community Go?
I think that normally students are very willing. I mean, GSoC is, although students get judged on the code, the quality of interactions with the community is also very important. For a lot of students, of course, this is about networking and opportunities beyond the initial scope of the project. So I think most students are willing to engage beyond their project. I've certainly never found any problems in the few projects I've mentored now with students not willing to get involved with the community. I think what's important is we always try and get students, as being said, to start testing pull requests. They start to interact with the community, get feedback on the things they're doing from an early stage, rather than just turning up at the end with a finished pull request and just kind of blindly eyes closed.
How have you found the community has responded to these people who may be perceived as being paid by the project to work on something?
I don't think it's considered that way. I think that Joomla is pretty, I mean, all open source projects have their issues with new contributors. You know, I mean, compared to Linux, I think we're a positive truth of love and happiness. But I think Joomla is pretty good with new volunteers, making sure that we kind of help them get in. I think GitHub helps with that as well. Like things like their little labels for first-time contributors and stuff makes a big difference because you can give extra support to people. And I think that, I mean, there's always exceptions to every rule, of course, but I think generally we're pretty good with new contributors, and I don't think GSoC people get given any different treatment to anybody else who's new to the community and wants to participate for the first time.
That's great to hear. For our students, again, let's mix it up. How many of you had done open source a year earlier than GSoC? Any of you been involved in open source a year before you started GSoC? Any of you? So you're all new into open source through GSoC. That's great to hear. What would you say was the thing that differed most from what your professors had led you to believe things would be like? So now there's always going to be a gap between what the professor describes and then what you discover in the real world. So I'd be interested to hear what your biggest kind of shock there was.
When teachers usually when you leave university, the real world is nothing like what they like. You aren't really prepared in university for the real world outside. Well, you are a bit prepared, but you get outside and it's a totally different thing. Like in our school, in our university, we're always they adopt a very open source approach. We use a lot of open source tools. It is really oriented towards open source, Linux, all of that. And in that way, we get a little prepared to go into an open source way. And so in that way, I think they prepare us a bit. But when you get outside, things are a bit different than we imagine in university. It's always different, a totally new experience.
Yeah, I think that the biggest surprise for them is to have to deal with so many teams interacting together. We are one team. There's a team to coordinate the whole program, and after that, there are other teams to coordinate different areas of the project, or even the core team to interact with the product. So sometimes we have to coordinate tasks with all of them, and that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, we have now run out of time. So can I have a big hand, first of all, for our students? And then, secondly, for the mentors and administrators that made that all possible. Okay, so if you want to know more, remember these faces, talk to them afterwards, or have a look on the volunteering portal at the GSoC section there. Thank you very much.